let's dive in. We've got a really interesting source today. It's a review for a film that, well, it sounds pretty special.
It does, yeah. Our source is a review straight from the Glasgow Film Festival, and it's looking at a film called The Ballad of Wallis Island.
Right. And our job here is basically to unpack this review, see what insights we can pull out, and really get a feel for what makes this film stand out, but, based only on what this one source is telling us.
Exactly. And the review kicks off with a premise that's, well, quite intriguing.
Oh, yeah? What's the core idea?
It's about these two former musical partners, haven't spoken in ages, and then suddenly they get this offer, an absolutely huge amount of money.
How much are we talking?
The review says hundreds of thousands of pounds.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, for just one gig on this really remote island. And right away, the review kind of uses that setup to signal how the film digs into music's connection to our past, our memories.
Yeah.
All that complex stuff.
Hundreds of thousands for one gig. Okay, yeah, that's definitely a hook. So let's get into that setup a bit more. Who are these former partners?
So first there's Herb McGwyer. He's played by Tom Basden. And the review paints him as a musician whose solo career is, well, maybe not hitting the heights he hoped for, struggling a bit.
Okay. And the other half of the duo?
That's Nell Mortimer, played by Carey Mulligan. And interestingly, the review makes a point that she's totally left music. She's making chutney now.
Chutney, right. That's unexpected.
It is quite the pivot. And the person bringing them back together, the one making the offer, is this character, Charles Heath, played by Tim Key. He wants them for this gig on Wallis Island, this remote spot in Wales.
And the review says they both just accept, unquestioningly.
Yep. Which, I suppose, for that kind of cash, may be less surprising if you're a struggling musician or even a chutney maker.
Fair point.
And the review doesn't, leave you hanging. It hints pretty early on that this whole experience on the island ends up having a transformational effect on everyone.
Ah, okay. So it's not just about the weird gig. It's about what happens to them while they're there.
Precisely. It sets the stage for some real character development, some changes.
Sounds like fertile ground. And speaking of the characters, the review seems really positive about the casting, the performances.
Oh, very much so. It singles out Tom Basden as Herb, calling him the jaded star.
And as he's huffy and demanding, but also, underneath that, bruised by his experiences, gives him some depth.
Yeah, exactly. And then Carey Mulligan as Nell is positioned as this sort of contrast, gentle and nurturing, especially next to her more brusque former partner.
But the one the review really seems fascinated by is Tim Key's character, Charles Heath.
Totally. The description is great. Infuriating, hilarious, and empathetic all at the same time.
That's quite a balancing act for an actor.
It really is.
Yeah.
And the review gives these little specific examples, like him purposefully mispronouncing his lines or making terribly timed puns. Helps you kind of picture him.
Definitely. And Cian Clifford gets a mention, too. Supporting role.
Yeah. As Amanda, the local shop owner, seems she brings in some comedy, but also maybe a touch of romance.
So overall, the takeaway on the acting front is strong.
Absolutely. The review uses phrases like excellent performances and palpable chemistry between the cast. Sounds like the ensemble dynamic is a real highlight.
Okay, great cast, interesting characters. How much of that is down to the script? The review seems to rate the writing very highly.
It does. It points out that Basden and Key actually wrote it themselves, based on a short film they did.
Oh, okay.
And the praise is pretty effusive. It calls the writing so sharp and so funny, you'll almost struggle to catch your breath.
Wow, that's high praise for comedy writing.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it specifically mentions the humor being uniquely British.
Right. And there was that specific example.
Yeah.
Quite dark, wasn't it?
Yeah, a reference to Harold Shipman that apparently had the Glasgow Festival audience choking on their Sauvignon.
Okay. So it gives you an idea. It's not afraid to push things a bit, sounds like.
Definitely suggests a sharp, maybe slightly edgy, comedic style, but one that clearly worked for that audience.
In this sharp writing, it seems like it's doing more than just getting laughs. The review points out something clever about how music is used.
Yeah, this is really central. It's not just background music. The film apparently uses the songs, their shared musical past, as the way into exploring these bigger themes: nostalgia, loss, grief, memory.
How does that play out with the characters?
Well, take Charles, Tim Key's character. The review says he is unable to detach himself from his notion of who McGwyer and Mortimer once were.
Ah, so he's stuck.
Kind of. Because their music connects him to this cozy, nostalgic glow of a happier time in his life. He needs them to be who they were.
While Herb, Tom Basden's character, is dealing with the present, his lack of success now.
Exactly. He's mourning his lack of solo success. And the review mentions unexpected jealousies because Nell has moved on. She no longer misses their former life.
So the very thing that connects them to music actually highlights how differently they feel about that past now.
Precisely. The review calls it an interesting take on the notion that music is something that binds us together. Because here, it seems to bind them, but also show the gaps between them now. They're different perspectives.
That is interesting. Does the review give an example of that?
It does mention one specific scene. Nell encourages them to write hopes and dreams on lanterns to release on the beach.
Okay.
And it notes that Herb is struggling to see what the future might hold for him precisely because he's so wrapped up is he in the past. It sounds like a really visual way to show that internal conflict.
Yeah, that makes sense. So the music is key to the themes, the characters. But what about the music itself? Is it any good, according to the review?
Juice like it, yeah. The soundtrack is described as warm and folksy.
And the singing, Basden and Mulligan.
The review is very complimentary, calls their voices excellent, and says they blend together beautifully.
Nice.
Their duets and love songs are singled out as genuinely gorgeous.
So it works on an emotional level, too.
Apparently so. The review suggests the music is so effective that some of the performances may have a few bottom lips trembling. So, yeah, definitely landing emotionally.
Okay. Now, the review does mention a potential downside, doesn't it? Something about being twee.
It does acknowledge that, yeah.
Yeah.
That for some people, it might all feel a bit twee and on the nose. A bit too sentimental, perhaps.
But it pushes back on that.
It does. It follows up immediately by saying there's something so heartwarming about it all that you'll be willing to overlook that. Suggests the film earns its warmth, basically.
Right. So it sounds like it manages that tricky balance, the really sharp comedy we heard about earlier, and this genuine emotional depth.
That seems to be the key takeaway. The review puts it quite plainly. The comedy is razor sharp, but the drama that unfolds is genuinely upsetting.
It's not sacrificing one for the other.
No, it suggests they work together. And it credits both the writing and the performances for knowing how to maximize both elements for the most amount of impact.
Which sounds like, skillful filmmaking.
Yeah, definitely. So wrapping up, the review gives a pretty clear recommendation, right?
It does. Calls the film a must-see, specifically for people looking for genuinely entertaining bit of British cinema.
And it highlights the setting, too, showcasing the striking Welsh coastline and phenomenal local talent.
The final summing up is nice. Gentle when it needs to be, utterly hilarious, and unapologetically good for the soul.
Good for the soul. That's quite an endorsement.
It really is. Just for context, the review reminds us this was the surprise film at the 2025 Glasgow Film Festival.
Right, which was the festival's 21st edition, apparently drew over 33,000 people.
And it even gives release dates, for anyone interested, March 28th, 2025 in the US and May 30th, 2025 in the UK.
Good info to have.
So, yeah, distilling this whole review down, what we're getting is a picture of this British film, The Ballad of Wallis Island, that seems to have really strong writing, excellent acting, beautiful music.
And it uses that music in a really interesting way to explore memory, loss, how people move on differently, balancing that sharp comedy with real heart.
Yeah, that blend sounds key. The review really emphasizes how music acts as this powerful, sometimes tricky link to the past.
And how the characters have these different relationships to that shared past, which causes friction, but ultimately leads to something the review calls good for the soul.
Which does leave us with a thought, doesn't it? The review paints this picture where engaging with the past, the music, the memories can be both connecting and kind of painful, especially when people are in different places now.
Right.
But the film is still described as good for the soul. So what does that actually mean? How can facing that kind of tension, that mix of connection and difficulty from our past be fundamentally, good for us? Something to maybe think about.